Hopefully he's doing good work.
He's doing great work.
Good. Good.
Well, it is 1 o'clock and respecting everybody's time. Are you all set, Kat?
Just 1 second.
Okay.
I am just figuring out how to move this. Okay, yeah, I'm ready if you're ready. And you guys can all see the screen, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Perfect. All right, thanks.
All right. Like to call this presentation to order, convene the meeting. We have with us today Chief Justice Raheem Mullins to make a presentation to the Commission on Judicial Compensation. And at this point, I'd like to welcome Chief Justice Mullins and turn the meeting over to him for his presentation.
Thank you. And thank you all for having me and listening to me. I'm going to do my best to respect your time and hopefully won't go on too long, but give you enough information to hopefully know where the judicial branch is coming from and give you our recommendation. I want to thank you all for volunteering on this commission. And I have no doubt you'll carefully consider the factors delineated in the statute and our recommendation. And before I go through the 7 factors, I wanted to sort of briefly describe what we're up against and what we're facing. Can I go to the first slide? So, like I said, before getting into the factors, I just wanted to sort of lay the groundwork on what we're facing and what the concerns that I have are. And they fall into 3 major categories. And it's the retention of judges, recruitment, and declining morale. On the retention piece, judicial salaries have been inconsistent and irregular over the past few decades. And this long-term piecemeal approach has had a detrimental impact on our institution. Right now, unlike any time in our history, we have people leaving the judicial branch. From January 2020 to December of 2023, 74 judges have departed from the judicial branch, many of them returning back to private practice. For recruitment, we're also experiencing some issues, especially with candidates from underrepresented communities. We learned back in 2020, the last time this commission met, that the affinity bar associations polled their membership. And one of the things that we learned was they said that inadequate salary is a deterrent amongst minority applicants to the judicial branch. And finally, the increase that I am recommending strikes directly at the heart of declining morale. We have seen an increase of violence towards judges nationwide. Connecticut is no stranger. I provided a couple of examples in this slide, but the incidents of threats are going up, and they're increased 31% over the last 2 years. Judges are sued, false liens are placed on their property, their family's personal information is broadcast, and all of this is in an effort to undermine this critical institution. Next slide, please. Now I'll try to briefly go through the 7 factors. Next slide, please. First factor is the levels of compensation of other states and federal judges. The National Center for State Courts publishes a survey of judicial salaries, and it compares the compensation levels for state judicial offices. This table lists the rankings of judges of general jurisdictions trial courts adjusted for the cost of living as of July 1st, 2024. This table ranks each state 1 through 51, including the District of Columbia, with the highest salary being ranked number 1 and the lowest salary being ranked 51. As you can see from this chart, which I've highlighted, Connecticut judges rank 37th among the 51. For the Connecticut judge's salary, which is equivalent when you take into account the cost of living, $159,280. It's below both the mean and the median, which is $180,000 for all judges across the country. The other significant factor you consider under this factor is federal judges' salary. Federal judges' salary is 21% more than a state superior court judge. Federal judges earn $243,300. A superior court judge now earns $201,000 and change. And this is a significant difference given that most of the issues that face our population are adjudicated in state courts by state judges and not in federal courts. The one other thing I would point out in this chart is if you look at the right side of the chart, Connecticut judges have consistently lost ground since 2000. So in 2021, we were ranked 34. 2022, we lost a step. 2023, we lost a step. And now we're down to being ranked 37th out of 51. Next slide, please. Connecticut judges' salaries also have not kept pace with the rate of inflation, which is the second factor to consider. And if you look at this chart, we determined the rate of inflation using the consumer price index. If you look at the chart, in 2020, a superior court judge's salary was $172,633. And if it had increased, we laid out this chart to show you if a judge's salary had increased with the rate of inflation, Connecticut trial judges would be making $206,296. But that is not what current judges make. The current salary is $201,023. So had judges' salaries kept up with the rate of inflation just since 2020, judges would be making $5,273 more than they do now. Or to put it differently, the salaries just since 2020 are 2.6% behind where they should be if they had gotten cost of living increases. Next slide, please. The third factor is compensation adjustments for state employees during the applicable fiscal years. And when we consider this chart, judges' salaries have not kept up with compensation for other state employees as well. This chart shows that state employees have gotten a 4.5% increase in each of these years. That's usually made up of their general wage increase of 2.5% and then a 2% step increase, also known as an annual increment. This was done for state employees in each of these years. And on the right side, you see what the judges' increase was. For 2021, it was the same. For 2022, we outpaced them by just a hair. But then in 2023 and 2024, state employees outpaced judges. Had judges just gotten the raises that other state employees had gotten, judges would be making $205,903. Next slide, please. This chart, this factor shows that we compare the levels of compensation received by attorneys employed by government organizations. This chart shows that the chief state's attorney, the 3 deputy chief state's attorney, the state's attorneys, the chief public defender, deputy chief public defender, and all 13 public defenders make significantly more than a superior court judge. The University of Connecticut's general counsel makes significantly more than a superior court judge, as does the University of Connecticut Health Center's chief counsel. This chart just shows that many in-state service, lawyers in state service make more than a superior court judge. Next slide, please. Thank you. This factor also looks for you to consider the levels of compensation received by attorneys employed in private organizations. And I included all the numbers here, but the one I highlighted is that a lawyer with 8 years of experience in a firm of any size, 307,500 is the median salary, which is $106,477 more than a Superior Court judge. So, in other words, an 8-year associate in a firm of any size would earn 35% more than a Superior Court judge. Next slide, please. The fifth factor is the overall economic climate in the state. And as of now, Connecticut's economic climate has improved over the last 4 years, and the forecast for the next 4 years looks promising as well. In his economic report of fiscal year 2025, Governor Ned Lamont states that Connecticut's economy remains strong and stable, citing growth in real gross state product, increased population, and rising employment levels and low unemployment rates. According to the Connecticut Department of Labor, in June of 2024, Connecticut has recovered all jobs lost during the 2020 recession. So key economic factors suggest that the state's economy continues to see growth. And given these indicators, the commission has the authority to recommend the increases for judicial salaries based on the state's projected strong climate. Next slide, please. The sixth factor is Connecticut's interest in attracting highly qualified and experienced attorneys. It's no secret judges make difficult decisions every day that impact the most sensitive and consequential aspects of people's lives, their personal liberty, their families, their houses, and their finances. The residents of Connecticut deserve to have judges with knowledge and expertise necessary to issue high-quality judicial decisions, promoting consistency, predictability, and fairness in the legal system. To accomplish this, the state must attract highly qualified and experienced attorneys to pursue judgeships. Additionally, it's in the state's best interest to attract attorneys who reflect racial and ethnic diversity of the residents of the state of Connecticut. This will help ensure that all perspectives and experiences of the members of our communities are represented in the judicial system, which also helps to enhance public trust and confidence in our judiciary. Next slide, please. This factor requires us to consider the state's ability to fund the increases in compensation. And here I'd note that Comptroller Sean Scanlon provided a monthly update on November 1st, 2024, and projected a fiscal year 2025 general fund surplus of $71.2 million and a special transportation fund surplus of $131.6 million. Both are in general agreement with the Office of Policy and Management's projections. We recognize as a judicial branch the economic challenges the state is facing, but we also believe that Connecticut can afford the modest cost associated with compensating judges consistent with their colleagues across the country. Next slide, please. An additional factor that we think is important for the commission to consider is the new salary structure for constitutional officers. In 2022, the General Assembly established mechanisms to adjust the annual salaries of legislators and the 6 constitutional officers. Base legislators and leadership salary amounts are adjusted every 2 years for inflation. Additionally, the legislature tied the annual salary for the governor to the salary of the Chief Justice of the state of Connecticut and the salaries of the Lieutenant Governor, the Treasurer, Secretary of State, Comptroller, and the Attorney General to the salary of a Superior Court judge. Similarly, we are requesting that judges be afforded periodic and consistent raises in line with the Consumer Price Index. Next slide, please. Okay. Now I'd like to provide just a quick summary of the conclusions. Next slide, please. So by every measure, the current compensation for Connecticut judges is well below what would be considered fair. The salaries rank 37th among 51 compared with trial judges across the country and the District of Columbia. Our salaries haven't kept up with the rate of inflation. They haven't kept up with the rate of increases of other state employees, and many lawyers in state government earn more than Superior Court judges who they appear before. Now, finally, for my recommendation, after taking all of these things into account, here are my recommendations. For fiscal year 2026, my recommendation is to increase the salary of Superior Court judges to $221,839. And that would bring a Connecticut Superior Court's judge's salary closer to the median of all trial judges across the nation. So in effect, what that would mean is we would go from being ranked 37th in the country just to 26th. So it would just bring us right to the median. For fiscal years 2027, 2028, and 2029, salaries should increase by the Consumer Price Index for urban users plus 2%. The 2% mirrors that which other state employees get as their step increase. So the other state employees get their general wage increase, and then they get the 2% on top of that. We're saying that judges should get that for the following 3 fiscal years. And then moving forward, recommending that the Judicial Assembly adopt a statute that would provide general increases beginning on July 1, 2026 and continue onward. Is there one more slide?
No, that's the last slide.
Okay. So just to sum up, what I would say is, as I mentioned earlier, we understand the various different funding decisions that the General Assembly has to make, but our courts play an essential and vital role in the society we live in, which is governed by the rule of law. And the integrity of our contracts, our social services, criminal laws, all depend on the integrity of having a well-functioning judiciary. We do have a strong judiciary now, but it's not an institution that simply maintains itself once it's established. We need the judiciary more now than we ever have, and it's up to each of our generations to do what we can to value that institution and preserve it and protect the ideals that this institution also protects. We can't let it wither away through neglect. I thank you for hearing me out today, and I welcome any questions you have for me.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice Mullins. I'll likely start us off. You talked about the new salary structure for the governor and the constitutional officers. Is the current salary of the Chief Justice and the Superior Court judges serve as a cap to the executive branch in terms of they can't exceed what is currently provided to the Chief Justice and the Superior Court judges?
I think that's right. I guess I would say it that way. I think they tied it to what we get. I don't know that they could get a raise in the off years while they're in office, but I think when that time comes, whatever the Chief Justice salary is, that will be what the governor's salary is, and also for the constitutional officers. I don't know that it would go up every year, like if we got a raise every year, but when it's time to true it up, I guess it will always match what the salary is of a Superior Court judge for the constitutional officers and the Chief Justice for the governor.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for Chief Justice Mullins?
Yes.
Attorney Shepherdson.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Herb Shepherdson from Cooney, Scully, and Dowling. I'm a practicing attorney, and I say that because I found some of these statistics stark, and I wasn't aware of them. And the 8-year associates in private practice earn, significantly more, 35–40% more than the judges. And as one who's in court regularly, I think it's important to attract attorneys from private practice. Is there any difficulty that is being found in terms of getting the appropriate breakdown? Because I think what Your Honor was saying is you want to draw people from all backgrounds, diverse in many ways. But I mean, is there any difficulties that we're seeing in terms of the recruitment of judges?
I think we are seeing some difficulty. I think with the report that I mentioned of the affinity bars from 2020, they said in their own words that the salary of judges is a deterrent to many of their members wanting to put in their applications to become judges. And when I looked at the statistics, just since 2001, from 2001 to 2004, Governor Lamont nominated 79 judges and 5 magistrates. 45 of them were from public service, and 34 were from private practice. And anecdotally, it's difficult to attract people in that range of 8 years of practice because of the significant pay cut that they would take. So some of the private practitioners are solo practitioners or people on the sort of back end of their career who come to be judges. But, there's a huge untapped resource in the middle, right around that 8-year mark, that we could tap into if not only the salary was more attractive, but there was a little more predictability in how raises would be given so they could know what they're getting into. And the way the structure is now, it impacts our ability to attract that group of attorneys.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mhm.
Any other questions for? Yes, Attorney Hitchell?
Yes, I do have one question for you. Are you asking for CPI plus 2% as the escalator going forward, or the same escalator that the rest of the state employees get?
I'm asking for a CPI plus 2% and understanding that, maybe the CPI might be less in 1 year than what the state employees might normally get. But that's the request, at least tie it to the CPIU, and we know that we could peg it to something.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron, I have a question, if I may.
Yes, Attorney Noble.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chief Justice. Thank you for this presentation today. Like Herb, I am before the trial court often. I'm interested in a description of what the trial court judge's schedule typically is like, the typical day-to-day or week. What does that look like?
Typically, it can vary, of course, depending on which division of the trial court you're in, but just speaking generally, and if you have more pointed questions, feel free to ask me, but generally, typical day is they are in the court, typically on the bench, 9 to 1, and then there's lunch, and then after that 2 to 5. It's a job that you don't, for a lot of the technology I want to update the court with and do, it is for the public mostly. Certainly will help the judicial branch run smoother, but judges have to be there all day. It's not a job where the judges are going to be able to do hearings remotely. They will have to be in the courthouse. Judges are usually on call even after 5 o'clock for warrant duty. Many judges have to sign probable cause warrant, taken to custody orders. All of those kinds of things judges will do even after hours and on weekends. So typically a judge is, hearing cases as you see, but then writing decisions on dispositive motions, on motions that they've heard. Each of those must be done within 120 days. There's a statute requiring the decision to be done within 120 days. So you can hear motions on short calendar. You can get 4 or 5 summary judgment motions, and then the next week you can get 4 or 5 more summary judgment motions. All of them have to be done within 120 days of the hearing. So typically they're hearing cases during the day, And often it results in having to write on nights and weekends to meet the 120-day deadline because the requirement that you're on the bench doesn't allow you to write while you're on the bench. So usually judges are taking care of the business of the court on the bench during the day and often writing decisions in the evenings and on weekends to meet the 120-day deadline.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Attorney Ogilvy.
Hi, good afternoon, Your Honor. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about one of the points you started with, which is judges leaving the bench. I feel like since I've started practicing, when I started practicing, I felt everyone just retired from the bench. And I do feel like there is a greater number of judges who leave the bench either to go back to private practice or government. Or could you just tell us a little bit more about that or what you're noticing?
Sure, we're noticing. I want to be fair and not oversell my position and say, all 74 have left because of the salary. But I don't think it would be understating it to say a significant number have felt that our raises aren't consistent. We're falling behind. You could see from the chart, we've gone from just in the last 4 years from ranked 34th down to 37th. People are hearing that even in public service, jobs that they've come from, being supervisors at the state's attorney's office or the public defender's office, are making more than they were. They're making more at their old job than Superior Court judges are making, and I think people are looking at that structure and making decisions that they weren't making years ago. Years ago, you get appointed to be a judge, and that was sort of it. And it was great. Now we're noticing an uptick, and we are aware that part of that uptick is people saying this compensation structure is not fair, to just put it bluntly. Which is why my request, at least for this first year, is to sort of level set us, put us at least at the median, where I think that's respectable. I don't think we're asking to be, the highest paid judges in the country. But for a state like Connecticut, and I will always say we have one of the best judiciaries in the country, to be at the median, I think would start to show people we care, and making an investment in judges and the judiciary is important.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Madam Chair?
Certainly. Go ahead.
Your Honor, I was it was stark when you were talking about the threats of judges. I mean, we occasionally hear about that, and I'm in court a lot, and I don't hear about it very much at all. I mean, can you elaborate on that? Does that have anything to do with why people are becoming judges or why they're leaving? Or I'm just curious.
Absolutely. I would say I'm not sure it's directly related to why people are leaving. I'm certain maybe it factors in to some extent. But the threats are going up. I spoke to our head of Judicial Marshal Services, and he said his concern, which I share, is that the threats used to be that people would say, I'm going to go to judicial review and report you for a bad decision. In the last few years, he said the threats have turned much more personal and much more towards, I'm going to harm you personally or your family personally. We saw just a couple of years ago that a litigant shot and killed a federal judge's spouse trying to get at the federal judge. I believe in Virginia, maybe Maryland. Here, I know here at the Supreme Court, we had a case involving Judge Bizzuto, where someone threatened to shoot her and described in scary detail her house, the gun he would use, the trajectory of the bullet, how it would go through one of the windows in her house that he could see from his perch. Incredibly disturbing. And there are other threats of that vein that judges are dealing with now. I want to be clear though. I think the reason I'm mentioning the threats is because it is significant. It is an issue. It impacts on morale, but judges do understand the difficulty of this job, and they take it on willingly. So I don't want to convey. I don't want this to seem like I'm saying, "Oh, woe is us. We can't do it because of these threats." I think most judges love their job. They just want to be compensated fairly.
Are there any other questions for Chief Justice Mullins? Justice Mullins, Your Honor, thank you very much for your time and the information that you provided to the commission. And if we have follow-up questions, we will reach out to Melissa Farley and go from there.
Thank you. And I want to just reiterate, if you need anything from me, I'm available. I'm happy to chase down anything you like or talk to you and appear again if you need me to. But thank you for your time and I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
The next item on our agenda is sort of a recap and discussion of the factors for consideration. Does anybody want to do some quick, debrief on this before we depart today, or follow up things that you, based on what you've heard, you'd like to know about so that we can capture those now and move forward with our work?
This is Dan Papermaster. I have just a quick question.
Sure.
Is the charge of this commission to set or to make a recommendation on compensation for what period of time? So like by way of example, the Chief Justice was looking clearly to try to get to the median on this whole thing. And I guess the question is, how long does that last? And then at what point do we reevaluate again? I apologize, but I don't know the answer to that.
My understanding, and I'd have to double check myself as well, Dan, is that it's typically a 4-year, a recommendation that covers a period of 4 years.
Great, thank you.
Aaron, to follow up on Dan's point, I suppose I can go look. The answer is probably go look at the past recommendations of past commissions to see how those recommendations have been given. The Chief Justice gave a proposal that built in increases over the next several years. And I was just interested in how that was handled, whether there was a set increase that applied to the future 4 years, or were there these percentage increases over time as requested. So like I said, I may answer my question by just looking at past recommendations.
Yeah, that's right. The 2021 commission, their recommendations included to increase the salary for Superior Court judges by 4.5%. And then in the subsequent 3 fiscal years, increase the salaries on a CPIU factor with a floor of 2.5%.
Thank you.
No commission, should no commission be convened in 2024, which is not the case because we're all here. They then recommended that cost of living adjustments should be maintained until such time as the commission is convened and issues its report, which apparently happened in 2016. There was no commission in 2016, so whatever had been done by the prior commission was, as my understanding, carried forward based on this.
I'd be interested to know how other state employees receive their increases.
That, as a result of my current job, I feel very free to comment on. Most of the other state employees are negotiated through a series of collective bargaining agreements, which the judicial branch is usually asked to join into if it's negotiated by CBAC as opposed to on a coalition. When I say CBAC, I mean on a coalition basis. The last two sets of negotiations have been coalition-based wage increases. And so that was a 2.5% and a step. And that both parties agreed that the step equivalent was essentially a 2%. The governor and the legislature, I'm not sure about the legislature, so you'll have to forgive me. They independently give their employees raises on a statutory basis through recommendations of the committee on, I'm losing its name right now, Legislative Management Committee, excuse me. And then the higher ed followed suit in terms of the coalition-based wages. So those were a 2.5% and 2 as well. 2.5% being sort of a general wage increase, or what some people call a COLA, cost of living adjustment. And then with regard to the managers and confidential employees who would otherwise be in a bargaining unit, but for the nature of their work, usually are given the same increases by administrative action by the Commissioner of DAS and the Secretary of OPM. They're given the equivalent of the bargaining unit raises. Managers have up until recently been subject to whatever the administration thought that they could provide to those employees. There was an effort in the not too distant past for managers to attempt to organize into a bargaining unit, and because they do have a management association, although it is not a formal union, the administration agreed to provide them the equivalent increases to those that had been given to the bargaining units.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? It probably would be interesting for this group for us to at least have a sense of what the cost would be to go to the median, to look at that as Justice Mullins' recommendation. And then sort of historically the CPIU, I'm not sure if that's the same one that the Social Security Administration uses, whether or not it's the CPIU or the CPIW. But that has been anywhere from 0 and usually hovers somewhere, or has for the last 20 years, somewhere between 0 and 3%. The anomaly being the 2022 at the 7%. Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
Is anyone interested in going above the median of exceeding his request and putting them at 35 or 40 in the top 35 or 40% quartile?
I got to tell you, I was surprised how, looking at the median, where we fit in, and what's not noted, and unless I missed it, and I apologize, got to have a deposition. I was trying to, glean through the report. Where we fit in on a cost of living, I mean, how expensive it is to live in the Northeast and in Connecticut, and where the judges fit in with states which clearly, I mean, the salary of a judge puts them into a different percentage in terms of income. And the comment, which I understand, is, well, they get great pensions, but you can't pay tuition, you can't pay bills, you can't pay mortgage. So I mean, I'm interested in listening to that. I'm not sure it's a practical thing, which is maybe where His Honor was coming in with that recommendation. But I mean, I thought it was, I mean, given the salaries and given the other people who are listed and what the judges do, it's interesting to what they get paid, to be honest. So my only comment.
I'd like to, before committing to anything like that, know what the costs will be. In terms
That may be the
of,
practical consideration, right? That may be the
Yes.
practical consideration. That's what I'm thinking. It's a political decision. You kind of wonder why you end up here, but yeah.
Right.
I
That's
will
probably
also
better.
note, though, as I look at the this graph of the cost, the court adjusted for cost of living index, where Connecticut falls, it is consistent with the surrounding states of Rhode Island, New Jersey, Massachusetts, which all have very similar cost of living. So I found that interesting, and I also think we have to keep in mind that we're comparing Connecticut and its size to, you know, these other states as well. Are the states that are in the upper 1 through 26 higher, do they have more people, more area, more revenue, which may explain why their salaries are so much higher. It's hard to say. I don't know the answer.
Cost is important, I think. I think that's
Although
good.
Delaware's pretty high.
Any other comments? Discussions, things that we should be looking at this point? We are scheduled for the 20th for the National Judicial think tank, if you will, that's what I'm calling it. They're scheduled to present on the 20th, and then we have the public hearing scheduled after that. No further discussion. Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Second,
Okay.
whatever.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And
Thank
we'll
you,
see
everyone.
on the 20th.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.